All right. I think we're live.
Hello.
Let me just check.
Boom shakalaka.
All right.
What is up, everybody?
We
Hey
are
guys, it's
we are
blockchain Brad.
live. What's going on, guys? It's K Dub here, and Crypto Love and Blockchain Brad. This is going to be very fun and very interesting for sure. So, how's it going, guys? I mean, how it's been a while since I haven't even actually ever done one with Randall. So, what's up,
This
everyone?
is
Way
this
too
is
long.
a first. This is a first, and it's been a while since Brad.
Yeah, it's just like good to catch up with more people in the space who are trying to do good, and K-Dub, thank you so much also for just, being a good friend in the space and also always organizing really interesting lives. You have so many of them.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'd love to talk stuff. So, for everybody out there, so this was actually Crypto Love's idea. He was like, "It's been a while since we've had a Neo discussion. We used to be huge Neo. I mean, I still am, but I remember the first time I met Randall without the beard, by the way,
Yeah, me
at
too.
Neo DevCon. So, yeah, just kind of catching up and seeing what's going on, guys. So, Brad, I mean, you're the one that you just had the recent interview with Malcolm, so you probably know
Yeah.
the most about what's going on.
Well, basically, I mean, obviously, it's just a conversation to just catch up and see what we think about it. But I think there was a lot of FUD, even as Renda was saying, is that when we were discussing this pre-interview, is just the idea of how important it is to just have that kind of not just intellectual discussion, but that social, unpacking of what the hell is Neo and what they're doing lately. And I think once again is that there's so much pressure on Larida right now because obviously he's regarded as a spokesperson for the community right now. And one of the main things he made clear, and I think I wanted to talk to you guys about this, is that enterprise is one of the key foci or focuses of Neo for the next phase. And a lot of people didn't understand, and rightly so, don't understand how that's going to happen. And that's also part of the issue is just not having enough PR, not having enough information disclosed. There's a few AMAs out there. So I think really for the most part, it's about just us trying to explore some of the things he's raised. And that's one of them is the enterprise aspect.
Yeah, they definitely said they were moving towards the enterprise application solution. That's a big deal. I know you, Brad. Every interview pretty much you ever make, you always bring up enterprise. Why is that so
Mm.
important to you specifically?
It's a really good question. It's more important now than ever, actually, because right now we're in that phase where utility is still a way away for almost all blockchain designs. And certainly we want to see more utility come to the fore. But right now, for me personally, I want to see more of the purpose of it, the benefits, and one of them is business. So if people come to understand ontology, for example, much better, what they'll find quickly is that the primary word or the paramount sort of purpose of ontology is enterprise too. So this is the thing I wanted to try and explain as much as I could and be clear, is that one of the things that is going to come forward for NEO is that they're going to develop a standardized system of smart contracts with ontology. And that's the word enterprise comes in here, and it has importance because when you have a platform like ontology that's so driven by enterprise and is facilitating through its sort of bifurcated design of having its own system, its own blockchain, but also trying to enable other businesses to build out using blockchain, then one could argue that this synergy that they're building through the smart contracts is going to, again, afford for an enterprise avenue for NEO. And that's a cool thing, and that's something that's quite new.
Well, what do you think about the
Now,
fact though that like they're using the Neo virtual machine? I mean, I know that that's like part of the whole moving forward. You have Neo 3.0 coming out, but you have a lot of people saying that if ontology is essentially just like a Neo clone and it's using the Neo VM anyway, why do we still need Neo? Like that's what I've heard the most. If they
that's a big question a lot of people are
Mm.
asking. Ever since ontology basically came out, people have thought that Neo is going away.
Yeah, I mean, there's an analogy I read in Crypto Briefing, and I think the way in which they explained it was that ontology is almost like Robin to Neo's Batman. But I sort of push it a little bit further, and I'm writing an article at the moment, which it'll come to the fore later. But I tend to think more so that ontology is something that's expanding the value of Neo. And so if we hark back to the virtual machine itself, remember Eric is the person who was the core technologist of Neo anyway. If you take it back even farther from that to on-chain, he was also one of the key architects of that as well. So really, one could argue that it's Neo's virtual machine, or you could look at it more as it's something that's integral to a bigger architectural design. And so for Neo to be utilizing that, it's also important to remember that Ontology is also designed on very different consensus mechanisms. Those in which drive the engine, the literal engine of Ontology, are different. And one of the fundamental differences is that it has a multi-chain design, which simply just means this in simple terms. It means that it has modules that are built in through its DID system, through other aspects. It's basically trying to break down, if you think of it like a car, for example, all the different parts all have core functions, but it helps that engine and that car move. So that's what Ontology is doing. Whereas Neo, if you look at it from a public chain perspective, it runs in that single vertical. It's focused on digital assets. So the complexities of the virtual machine are relevant to both, but one doesn't really impinge on the other. But in fact,
those core modules, they're completely redesigning them, right? That's like the whole part of it to make it run smoother, essentially.
Essentially, and also these are new innovations that are being built on that separate public chain. So Ontology doesn't run on the same system in any way. They're completely distinct. And I think that's also where some of the confusion lies, because some of the FUD is that people are saying that DA is essentially giving up on Neo and moving across to Ontology.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, for absolute certainty, looking right down that camera, is that that's not true. I've spoken to DA personally. I've also confirmed it with Li Jung from Ontology, so it's absolute fact from both of them. That's FUD, that's bullshit. It's not true. Basically, what's happened is Da Hongfei or Hongfei, he is someone who has an invested position in all of those. He is the founder of many of these different companies, and so obviously he's going to have a say and he's going to have a stake. Has considerable weight in each of the parties from on-chain, Neo, and Ontology, but with regard to, if we talk about the boardroom itself, Da Hongfei is never part of the official boardroom of Ontology. And his intention is not to move across into that space and have any sort of dictatorial role or any CEO-like role. That's never you're never going to see that emerge. In fact, right now in consensus, he's literally leading the way still in Neo, and he's trying to educate people on the innovations of Neo and what they're doing. I do want to say, though, to every community member out there who has concerns about the PR and the way that the dearth of PR that we've seen in the past, you're absolutely right. It's not good enough that the CEO of a company like Neo isn't speaking loudly, and Da's now starting to show that he needs to lead the way more. And I think it's great to see him in Singapore speaking once again on stage as the CEO, so people have that that much needed information regularly, I guess, disclosed through the different channels that Neo.
Yeah, I feel like Neo, they focus really hardcore on the developer community, but they don't really focus on the investors or the speculators or us. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they had over 17 different conferences just in the months of February and March alone, which is, it shows. And, they have all these different things they're rolling out. They have the Neo games coming out and all these other things. But I do agree with you that there was that sense of like, you're not really responding to like the investor, like you and me, like what can we expect? What's going on, behind the scenes. So I do agree with that. And I really do appreciate the fact that you actually sat down and spoke with Malcolm too. That was a really great interview. So thank you for that.
Oh, no worries. And I think as well, I think you raised a really good point about basically how people want more. They want to hear more about the information. They want to hear more about not just the tech, but more about what makes sense to them with regard to, understanding why Neo perhaps is
the tech is important too, though, Brad. I mean, come on, like there was at one point, every time Neo was running an ICO, it was literally freezing up. It was having issues. If a consensus node went down, the whole network was freezing. So those are legitimate concerns. Wouldn't you say so? I mean, look at Ethereum. I mean, look at the load that Ethereum is handling, and people like to, poke fun at that. But Neo was having a lot of issues as well.
100% agree. I mean, I've always been a proponent of the technology. I really genuinely believe that for any of these systems, these platforms, to ever have some sort of semblance of value, they have to be driven by tech. And the thing for me, though, Kyle, is that a lot of people have really different expectations within the ecosystem of cryptocurrency, within the whole space that we're in, and even beyond that, for those who perhaps don't know. For example, like for some who are proponents of the true and ideal protocols of BTC, then obviously they are proponents for a completely and puristically decentralized ecosystem. They want it to be something that, a bit like Monero, something anonymous, something that isn't traceable, something immutable. But if you look at it from a different position, from a more of an enterprise geared system, you want to actually have inherent components that are centralized. Doesn't mean that you're not supporting the ideals of blockchain. And so what Hongfei recently said on stage, and I agree with him, is that if you compare Ethereum and Neo, it can almost be argued that it's a bit like oranges and apples, in that the position in which each of these stand in the decentralized debate are different. And so Neo, with its minimal nodes, it's designed that way for scalability. It's designed that way so that they can have a better means in which to move in the enterprise direction and to build out blockchains. So there are different agendas for the two, and I think that we need to probably stop talking about how we compare the two and look at more of the potentials for them to work together, so that we can see what happens in the next phase of blockchain. How do we integrate business into them? And what specifically, if you want to talk with Neo, how are they going to do that? So Larida has said very specifically that that's the big next step for them. And they don't even have to wait, years for that. They're literally working on that now in the next few months, in terms of even the dApps that they come forth with, how they're going to integrate. I think you'll see a lot more news come forth, because even Larida recently, Malcolm Larida, has said that he's more willing to engage in the community. He's more willing to step up, and Dar's certainly showing he's back in business. He's back on the stage to truly answer some key questions about Neo.
Yeah, that's good, man.
You talked about ontology a little bit, and another thing that was concerning some people was that developers were leaving Neo for ontology. I'm guessing choosing from City of Zion to work on ontology instead of Neo. Is that a concern?
That's a good question. It's not, and this is once again coming from the feedback from both sources. Ontology itself has one of the largest developing communities of any specific blockchain project in the crypto world. So in that
bigger
respect,
than Ethereum?
Well,
Ethereum's pretty massive.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I suppose it depends on how you measure it. So if you move across to Neo, for example, I mean, you have 3 different entities, all associated with developing. So you've got the COZ, you've got the labs in China, and you've also got another organization. Yeah, exactly. So if you measure it from that metric, then one could argue that there's a vast network of developers in Neo even. But I'm talking more about those specific engineers that are internal to the ecosystem, and they're not part of the community-based ecosystem. So with Ethereum, for example, it's much more community-driven, but that's not how Ontology works. Like, they have in-house specific internal teams, and arguably this is one of the largest in blockchain. And so that affords them, once again, to really build out their capacity. It allows them to have clear directions, just like any business.
Yeah.
But with Neo, it is a little different. They are very much geared, again, in that community frame. And it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. If they're going to move in the direction of Ontology in terms of enterprise focus, they're probably going to build out their core team as well, I would think. Because right now, and I can tell you also some other things with that, the offices themselves are separate. They used to be more aligned, and in fact, I think they were situated in the same level of a building. But they are no longer in that sense. And I have literally asked this directly to Malcolm Larida, and he has said that at no point, and even to this day, has anyone from Neo actually made that transition across to Ontology. So I hope that answers the question, Randall, in that that's just not...
Well, I think it's important that they define themselves individually. I think that's the issue. There was no clarity in the beginning, and I kind of had this, maybe I was just dreaming this concept. I almost saw Neo as like the housing for the digital assets, and I saw Ontology almost as the conduit that sort of connected the enterprises into this place where they could sort of hold their assets. And then I don't know if this is still the case, because I don't know what's going on with the G3 Alliance or whatever, but I assume that it was all going to be running on Elastos. I don't know. Has that picture changed? I mean, because now they're not even associating with them anymore, the G3.
I think that's a really good point. And I was really surprised, actually, that in the interview when I spoke with Larida, that he didn't really know that much about that. He couldn't really talk to it. But the truth is that what seems to happen in blockchain is that as you move across and you forge partnerships, some of those partnerships aren't even necessarily finite, in that how they evolve is still something of an experiment for even those who sign it, because everything's so nascent and so raw right now in blockchain. So I think that's more what happened, is that it was a very experimental process. That's not an excuse, but getting back again to, I guess, the differences, between Ontology and Neo, is that they are two distinct public blockchains. And that word public is really important, because the roots of both of them come from a permissioned intention of on-chain, in the sense that on-chain was always designed to basically cater for the needs of business, but do it in a fashion that was more conducive of privatization. So what Ontology is doing is really cool. They are allowing for that to be still potentiated through their public system. So they are proponents of working with consortium and working through supporting, indirectly government as they move into the needs of blockchain. But Neo is very different. Up until now, Neo still is that single vertical. It's very much community driven, very much about digital assets, very much an ICO support mechanism.
Well, so I wanted to point that out quick. I know you've been talking a lot, Brad. I really appreciate all the
Sorry.
No, it's okay. You're the one. I mean, you are the guy that's in the middle of this. That's why you're on the channel. But I was thinking about that too. I mean, as far as even just like the scaling, like you're having the issues with Ethereum as well. Now we know they're doing 1,000. I know it's a little tech, but they're doing 1,000 TPS, right? So I actually was looking into it. A lot of people like to compare things to Visa, MasterCard, all these. But it's funny because even though a lot of these guys can push the 10, 20, 30,000, mostly on an average day, Visa's doing like 2,000. You can Google that. That's like an average, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Or whatever they're doing. So really, Neo would only have to double, right? But my question is, how are they planning on implementing that? Because this is my issue. There's been a lot of things, like when I went to Neo DevCon, there were so many things that they were adamant about. They were like, we're going to scale. We're not going to use sharding. We're not going to use multi-signing. We're going to be able to do, all this different stuff. Neo is not forkable. Now, Dahongfei literally just comes out saying we're planning a fork and we're looking to implement dynamic sharding. So it's like a completely different Neo than when I got into it. It could be for the better though,
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember that statement too. He was talking about 100,000 TPS, non-sharding, literally by 2020. I think that was the statement he made. And I think that's the other interesting thing is that they realize that the imperatives are still always there for scalability. The question is, what do you trade? What's the trade-off for that? And the trilemma issue is always at the forefront of all these blockchain, architects' minds in the sense that they don't want to forego one for the other. Some are providing better solutions right now in the sense of trying to, not disaffect one part for the other. But with Neo, I think the main thing they want to do is do it in such a way where they still maintain the position of supporting a quasi-centralized system so that they can maintain that scalability. Because as soon as you open up something so it's like a multitude of nodes and you have all of the potential of parallel or horizontal scaling, that also can make things really difficult, because whilst you have that capacity to build out your ecosystem, it often challenges the scalability itself. So I don't think that any blockchain should be precluded from innovating through new technological experimentations, and that's what you're really saying. So once again, nothing is finite in a blockchain, and no CEO, in my opinion, should ever say, "Oh, this is exactly how we're going to do it, and these are the absolutes," because that would likely be bullshit. Because these things should evolve, and the technology should also evolve with it.
Absolutely. Not to cut you off, but somebody wants to know if they say they get a free T-shirt on my chat, will you send them the Crypto Love? Did they get one on my chat too? Sorry, just had to lighten it up. The guys everyone's having fun over here for sure. So, what about you, Randall?
Shirts every day on my channel. Yeah.
What about you, Randall? I mean, what is your particular? I mean, do you have any things that? I mean, use your idea. What were the main?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we've answered a couple of the questions so far. First, is Neo dead? Is Da leaving? Are the devs leaving? So those are some questions we answered already. Also, Neo's prediction to be #1 by 2020. We were talking about things that they talked about at Neo DevCon. So one of the things they mentioned was being #1 by 2020. And I think since DevCon, they've actually gone down in rankings quite a bit. They were in the top 10, now, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, somewhere around there. Do you guys think #1 by 2020 is still possible?
Well, I mean, as far as #1, as in overtaking Bitcoin, probably not. But #1 smart contract platform. I mean, you have EOS that came out, right? And EOS kind of took a completely different approach than Neo. I mean, some people argue that it's still a little centralized with whatever the block producers, but EOS was like, oh, here it is. Here you go, everybody. Whereas Neo is still being very restrictive over it. But even if you've noticed some of the things that they've been doing recently, for example, just limiting the blocks to 500, the parameter to 500, because they were having basically spam and they were saying it was useless. So they're really paying attention. And I feel like with Neo, they're always looking 2-3 years ahead. They're not really concerned about now. They know that right now you can kind of get away with it. But if this does take off, I think that they're kind of looking to the future. That's what I always got with Neo. So, I feel like they've been doing a lot like that. But then, for example, you still have things like the City of Zion running on the testnet node. Why? Or have they, do you know, are they on the mainnet? Because I remember the last time we checked, they were still running a test consensus node, right? So why is that taking so long, I guess?
Yeah. And I mean, I think also one of the things we to understand better the position of Neo is to understand the changes in price. If we want to go to that metric as well, if that's a determination of its value.
That's the market, though. You can't even.
Well, the thing is, though, that for a period of time, there was hype really drove the whole market itself. And so for that reason, I think, now we're starting to see more true valorization standards for different blockchains. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing as we move into potentially a longitudinal bear market. Really, what's really important is that you see evidence of the potential, you see evidence of growth, you see evidence of the direction of utility. Neo right now has done, up until, for the last 6 months, to be fair to the people, hasn't done a stellar job of informing what they're actually doing. And so that has a huge impact on how it's perceived, whether or not it be true. Because once again, we're in a sentiment-driven market and people demand that. And if they don't get what they want, they will leave that investment because it is an investment initially. And so for that reason, the imperatives are always to disclose their updates and provide that key information. But on the flip side, often we see the very best technology, the very best projects actually going quiet. They're in stealth. And they're so super confident in their future that they don't tend to think they need to. And that's the problem. Is that if they have the ability to develop the tech, they still need to engage and balance the equation. So with regard to that, whether they be number one, or will they be number one in 2020? I'm going to be really honest and say, no, I don't think so. And the reason why is because it's a long process for Neo. It's not 2020. We're talking about all the way to 2030. It doesn't mean they'll be number one by then. But to be honest, really, I think it would be remiss of anyone to say, oh, this is definitely going to be number one by then. There's just too many variables right now to say which one will be. But what is good is that they are one of very, very few platforms that have their own virtual machine, that have an ecosystem, that have a community. They literally have all the different facets that you need to start something. As to whether or not they can maintain that, that's going to be determined by the degree in which they integrate with enterprise. That's going to be determined by the degree in which they have utility. Mm-hmm. It's going to be another imperative is, are they going to have dApps on their system that actually have value? All of that's going to be relevant. And another thing to remember as well is, are they going to piggyback on the fact that they are situated in a country that is very difficult to, I guess, accept the other different models of, for example.
Well, I think China's issue isn't so much Neo specifically. I think China's very all about blockchain from what I can tell, and very much about tech. I think they just can't stand speculation. I think that's their problem. They just don't want the same thing with the US, people just throwing their money into projects, I mean, Neo sounds great. All these projects sound great on the surface, but really we have to see where this takes us long term, especially with some of these alternatives coming out. You have DAG models and Holochain. Look at what they're doing. So there's a lot of different types of tech right now, and it's extremely speculative. Personally.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you, Brad. I just saw a tweet the other day that said, at this rate, Neo's about to rebrand back to Ant Shares.
Well, I don't think that'll ever happen. That's for sure. I mean, no one wanted to invest in a strange little ant. That's for sure. Even though had someone have done that, they would have done very well. I think
I actually got some back when it was Ant Shares.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like $4, $7. That was like my. Wow. That was actually what's funny for me is Neo was my first real coin I bought outside of Bitcoin. I bought Bitcoin first. I never bought Ethereum, which is weird because I know you did first. And then the next one that I bought was actually Ant Shares. So my introduction to crypto was just like, this is awesome. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I love crypto.
Me too. I was the same as you. I invested in Neo as my very first investment. And the reason why I did it was, we could talk for hours on this, but it was truly because of the technology. And so once again, it's ironic almost that we're talking about this, given that it's been a year since those discussions.
The DBFT, man, when that came out, people freaked out over that, so.
Yeah. But because you now have ontology, and I think that's important to recognize, we're talking about in China. Now, the landscape of China is also really important. You are exactly right, KW, in that, it is pro-blockchain. Everything about the Chinese government's position is very much proponents of the potentials. But the thing is, they're a little bit anti-crypto in the sense of they don't, anti-ICO, as you know. So, you know, when you see other prominent blockchains, though, entering the landscape, one of the key speakers recently in Singapore was saying from Ethereum that they felt like there was a bit of an aversion from China's position for Ethereum even. And even Hongfei was saying that's just not the case. It's not the case that there is this aversion. But the thing is, if you're a prominent Chinese blockchain like Neo and you are situated there in Shanghai or, you know, in the offices of Beijing, and you already have a significant ecosystem, China is going to recognize that in a different way. And so that's one of the.
Do you mean like ecosystem, like within like Neo, like the smart economy thing they're trying to build type ecosystem?
Well,
or?
Within the sense of the fact that they are situated in China, they are born in China, they originated there. Their original tech was designed by Eric. You know, for several years, for 3 years, it was predominantly he who led that. So what I'm saying is that even though China is pro-blockchain, the fact that Neo was born in this environment is actually a boon for Neo, because that also feeds into the potential success of ontology. All of these interconnections with enterprise and government are all much more powerful because they started there. So now, even though both these ecosystems are going to thrive in a more global setting, it's not something I think we should overlook in terms of if we want to estimate the value of both these different blockchains, because China is such a major player in business globally, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, they're massive.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of potential, untapped potential in the sectors of.
You know what I like though about you were talking about the ecosystems, right? One thing that I found really cool is obviously when you talk to these ICOs or projects coming out on Ethereum, they're all separate. They're all just making a dApp here, making a dApp here. They're just using Ethereum as like the main platform. But what I find with Neo is when you talk to these guys, everything's kind of created to be sort of like compatible and work with everything. And the one thing that I found super cool was like speaking with teams like Moonlight or even Dean, you know, from NOS NOS. It's really cool that you find that a lot of these dApps are agreeing on, they have their utility token, but then gas, like Neo Gas, is the accepted payment. So like, for example, if you're on Moonlight and you're getting offered a gig or something, right, and you're going to go get some work, you're going to get paid in gas. And that really helps to promote the central coin or token of the ecosystem. And I think that's a really well-focused plan, you know, like.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because both Ontology and Neo have that dual system of the token, the governance aspect, and also the utility. And I really like that because once again, it consistently rewards the users of both those ecosystems. But there was one thing I was going to ask you both on this, with regard to some of those dApps that are coming on board. You actually see some real synergies between, like, for example, recently there was a music-based app that came on to Ontology. And it's doing something pretty much similar to, I think it was iMusify for Neo. So the functionalities are inherently the same. So I guess I wanted to pose the question to you guys as well. What do you think about that in terms of, you know, you're seeing two potential businesses of the future doing something similar on both the ecosystems, both public blockchains. Why do you think that they would do that?
That's one of the things that I've always found somewhat concerning, is that ontology does pose, even though it kind of spawns from on-chain and kind of working with Neo, it poses competition to Neo at the same time. Because initially ontology was on the Neo blockchain, and there was talk about ontology gas, and it wasn't even clear if it was going to be the same gas that was used with Neo. But now I think we're coming to understand that it's something separate. They've gone to their own mainnet. So like the relationships between ontology or Neo, it seems now that it's less together and it's more of an either or. But
yeah, I agree with you totally.
On the same note there, like, I mean, it is kind of a free enterprise, so, you know, we'll see whichever music app does better is the one that's going to stick around.
Yeah, well, Li Jung actually said, and this is literally coming from him, it's kind of an exclusive, is that his response when I asked him, he just said, look, Brad, like, at the end of the day, if it's a really good product, I'm not going to say no to it. This is business, you know, I want Ontology to grow. So the agenda isn't anti-Neo or trying to, you know, be a competition. It's just smart business. Ontology want to grow and develop something. But the cool thing I always remember back, you know, when I try and sort of reconcile the value of these two as a system, is that Hongfei is sort of like holding the umbrella. And underneath that is all these different parts of this. And he's got a real interest in all of them. So he's not the kind of guy who's going to set this up so that they are vying for business and they're vying for it. And again, we hark back to that new standardized smart contract alignment and agreement that they are coming forward with. And also, there's one other thing I was going to say is that Larida, in the interview, he actually said to me that there's an MOU between Ontology and Neo, meaning that...
Oh, yeah, there is, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's cool because that means that they're always held to account for what they're doing, and there is degrees of control. And Larida said to me that, or Malcolm said, I should say, that basically...
that MOU though is to support the Neo virtual machine and the Neo contracts though, right? So like that's kind of the thing is like people that are worried about Ontology overtaking Neo, but part of that MOU is to support the Neo virtual machine. So that kind of ties you in by default. So you're relying on that. Yeah. Right.
And so that strengthens more of the potential of Neo. And once again, a lot of people, like what was really interesting is a good friend of both KW and mine, his name is Nathan, he works with Altcoin Buzz, is that he recently did a really cool video where he'd gone around and asked different people what their top, position was. And if you do an analysis of that, number one response came out was Ontology. So there's a lot of sentiment in the space that it's a really good ecosystem, it's got a lot of value. But once again, if you ask people why, they really do struggle to understand why it is.
Every time I put out an Ontology video, like the next week it's different. And I'm like, right, I got to look at it again. It's so, yeah, but Brad.
Well, the thing is a lot of the support from Neo that went to Ontology. I think a lot of the people who were interested in Ontology came from Neo, and they even sold their Neo positions to buy Ontology.
Yeah. And that's because I think, once again, we're in a period of time where things were growing so rapidly. And so, I don't think I don't judge people for making that switch at the time because it was really it was a capitalistic move. It was an opportunity to potentially make some money, I suppose, as an investment in their concept. Because the growth of Ontology initially was obviously very good, much like Neo's was. But now, as we move into a much more stable sort of bear system, I think it really affords us time. And that's our most precious resource.
Name one project that didn't do that. Everybody says, oh, this is garbage. Look at Neo's chart. Look at Icon's chart. Look at Cardano's chart. Look at any chart.
Dude, BitConnect definitely did not because I was going straight from the corner.
Well, the thing is,
BitConnect was...
KW, I agree with you completely, but I think at the same sense, there was no other kind of synergy like this, where you had Neo and Ontology together collectively, one being released before the other. At different times, they'd hyped in terms of value. So naturally, when you see these two, and if someone's a proponent of that ecosystem, it's likely they're going to make that switch, thinking it's all part of the same entity. But what I'm saying now is, I want to try and educate as much as I can. They are distinct, in the sense of what they're both trying to do. But at the same time, it makes no sense for someone to say, oh, well, Neo's going to fall to the wayside because Ontology is a front runner. It just doesn't make sense because they're literally trying to do different things.
Yeah, exactly. What is, not to kind of get a little off topic, but I haven't had a chance to really talk to all you guys in a while. What do you guys think about everything right now? We've been talking about the markets. What's your, I know Crypto Love's so happy about XRP right now. I know you're so happy.
To the moon. That's all I'm saying.
Dude, you got to make more of those sarcastic videos because then that's when the coin pumps 44%. So just let me know when you, I obviously I don't own any, but let me know the next time you plan on making a video. I'll definitely invest.
Yeah, I didn't know I could influence the market like that, but all I have to do is some sarcastic Ripple videos and it just shoots up.
But let's talk about that though. I'd love to hear from you. I've talked way too much, but what do you think about the role of influencer? It's ironic we're talking like this, but I don't like to think of myself. I mean, I'm a boring speaker, so I don't have that kind of popularity that both of you have, but it's more a case of what do you think about the way in which the system's designed so that literally markets can be thwarted by people like, prominent VCs aligning, or it might be a group of influencers that we don't know about, things like that.
I don't know. Like, I think it used to be a lot worse when we first got in. I think people are like, honestly, I think people don't trust influencers anymore. Like, I think there's been so many influencers that shilled so many projects. And honestly, people on my channel, they know I don't freaking listen to anything I say, man. It's just my opinion, you know? But I think a lot of people have definitely been burned by like, oh, this guy said to buy this. And really it's just because he has a whole bunch of it, you know? Like, I mean, I don't want to mention anybody, man, but I've spoken to some people that have actually been like, hey, like, let's pump this kind of thing, low cap coin, put it in a top. And I'm just like, dude, this is nuts. And you're going to do this to your subscribers, which is the worst. The people that are here to trust you. So, and then, you know, on the next level, the VCs too, like the first time, you know, NGC would invest, it was super exciting. And then after a while, it's kind of like you just, and I'm not picking anyone, any VC. I think after a while that you just kind of like, I'm tired of losing money. I'm just going to do my own research, you know?
Yep. I love how transparent you are about it and how honest. Because
what do you
so
think?
Nice to hear.
Love.
Well,
I think.
Yeah. What do you think?
That Yale study that came out that said that news is the most impactful thing. Well, one of the two most impactful things on cryptocurrency price. And so, I mean, we basically are the news source for a lot of cryptocurrency stuff because people can't go other places. It's outdated. And so because of that, definitely during December, January, you could see influences in, because like, for instance, there would be like there was the privacy coins that came out. Like they all of a sudden were important and everybody started talking about privacy coins and every privacy coin jumped up in price. And then after that, there was the SegWit coins and those came out and people started talking about SegWit coins.
Remember Groestel coin? What is that? Groestel coin? Like 200 X or something?
Coin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like all of those things, it definitely makes a difference. And I mean, I think we're even seeing it now. Like I was mentioning that today on my episode, every article in the news right now, literally every article is about Ripple. And Ripple's price is coming up. Like it's no surprise that XRapid is coming out. People knew it was coming out. But you know, XRapid's one part of RippleNet, and it's the only part that could potentially use XRP. So it's not like XRP is going to be any more used than it was previously. But all of a sudden, because that's every news article right now coming out, and especially there's nothing else happening, the price is jumping up because somebody wrote an article that said Ripple could be $589 by the end of the year, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Insane.
Because for that to happen, Ripple would have to be worth more than all of the money, all of the currency in the world.
Exactly.
All right, for that to happen.
How can you even allow an article like on a credible source to be published like that? You know that's not even.
I think you raised exactly the point as well, right there, K-Dub, is that the credibility of that source is something I used to, when I had a lot of time when I was first doing videos before the interviews that I do, I would look deeply at the source of the media article. And often you saw, like if you dug deep enough, if you researched enough, who was actually paying that media entity, you know, and often it was actually like it might have been it might have been a VC, or it might have been, but it was certainly there was subjective like interest from that source to write that article. So what I mean is that, like, at the end of the day, it's really hard to find objectivity in the space. Literally is, because there's usually all these different mixed agendas, and even down to the VCs. Like, from my experience so far in this year, I will honestly say that I've been shocked by different alliances that exist. And it's really important that people are transparent about that, because at the end of the day, what we want to see evolve is the most transparent and the most real system possible, because that's why we all, got into blockchain, is for the transparency, for the beauty of what it can actually do. And I don't want to see the default sort of, affordances of a tiered system really compromise that. And so that's why I think more than ever, a tech-driven system is the most important thing we can do. Not just enterprise, but not hype for hype's sake. But hype is not a problem for me. That's a natural part of every business. But if it hasn't got real tech to actually do something, then why the hell would anyone want to buy that, whether that be short-term or long-term? You see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we were, I was speaking to Crypto Spark the other night, and he was saying that, in some instances, speculation is good, because, it kind of like jumpstarts that interest. I mean, people like developers speculating that Neo's the next big thing, for example, that's what gets them, excited to go try it out. So in one hand, it's good, but then at what point do we actually have to have that application, where it's usable? And I don't know if you guys like watch my channel, but I've been really focusing lately on actual just adoption. Like, I don't like, tech is great. I love talking about tech. It's awesome. But like, seriously, like, no matter how great your tech is, if nobody uses your platform, it doesn't have a good user interface or it doesn't actually solve problems, if it's not cheaper, faster, more secure, they're not going to use it. So
And I think it all comes together, like at the end of the day, it's a bit like having an engineless car. If the engine is the tech, then the car is going to run well on the fuel, based on the fuel that you give it. So in this sort of like analogy, it's the same for the crypto industry as well, because like you were saying, you have to have users, you have to have drivers who are in those seats, and build freeways, make it really robust, make it really interactive. But at the end of the day, if that engine is the tech, then that's going to be something that really will be the mainstay for that particular project. And I often see that it's kind of the opposite. I often see projects with literally no engine, but they have a beautiful Ferrari or Lambo body, and they come out, looking like they're ready to hit the freeway. But the thing is, they can't even move. They literally have no engine. And so for me, the tech really does and always will be important, because it literally is the ingredient that says, okay, we can actually achieve the utility. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of adoption, one person who I met recently, Ken Bozak, he's been kind of inspirational for me because he kind of walks the talk in terms of adoption. He only uses Bitcoin, and he's playing every single DApp out there, every single blockchain-based game, because I think we talk about mass adoption, and there's I think it was Gandhi who said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So we need to start adopting ourselves in order to be that adoption. So as uncomfortable as it is to use these things, like to use DTube and Steam it just because it's clunky and it's not easy, I think that we need to start doing that, and also just using Bitcoin for more transactions and going to do that stuff. So that's the one thing that, Ken really inspired me to do that, and I'm starting to do it myself. But I think just because the more we adopt it, the more other people can adopt it. And also on that note, I was watching BitBoy interviewed the Tour de Crypto today. So one of the guys from the Tour de Crypto, who's bike riding from New York.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah,
spreading the news of crypto. And what the guy was saying was that they haven't met anyone yet who hasn't heard of Bitcoin. But
right.
What they've met is that everybody thinks it's an investment. Right? It's not something to use. And so most people in the United States are living paycheck to paycheck. They just don't have money for investments. So until it becomes that thing that you use every day to pay as opposed to an investment, a lot of people just aren't going to have the money or the interest to get into it.
Exactly. I'll tell you what, man, straight up. I was thinking about making a video about it actually, but I've been using a company called Allegoria. You can check them out right now, allegoria.com. And literally you can buy on Amazon. I mean, technically it's not P2P because Amazon doesn't accept Bitcoin, so they're really just doing the conversion super quick for you. But yeah, man, I bought myself a new toothbrush. I got some cooking books and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, those are the types of things that we need. I mean, Brad knows. I mean, if anyone feels the heat of the market, it's me, man. I mean, I have very minimal in my bank account, man. It's almost pathetic how much. I mean, I have my life savings in crypto. So
and I think that's really admirable for all those who are engaged in this kind of. I mean, you mentioned the word investment before, Rendell, but at the end of the day, we are also trying to, by being involved in this ecosystem, we're also trying to support the future utility. And so what we've all copped, by being participants in this is I guess the experience of watching the markets fall and still being in that. I'm proud that we can say that we didn't move horizontally into fiat because literally we're here for the long haul to support the ecosystems that are there. But, with regard to BTC, for example, a lot of people tend to sort of conflate the SOV, the store of value, with the enterprise potential. And I think that's where I always want to try and sort of pull the brakes for a moment, because the whole point of BTC really fundamentally by the Nakamoto protocol is to really be global, whether or not that be, now or later, but that was the whole point of it. And right now, if you go to a developing country, it is tough. It's a tough ask right now for them to use BTC just because of the inherent costs that are associated with it. I want to see those kind of things change so that it can be global. Whether it be BTC, whether it be something else, I honestly don't care. What I care about is that some sort of SOV, a store of value, transforms into being a global transactional means of exchange.
Well, what are your thoughts on all these stable coins to everybody? I mean, you've seen them popping up. I mean, what do you guys think about them? Are those, do you think they're going to help get people in, or is it just kind of great, I mean, look at the Gemini thing. They can literally freeze it. You can turn it off.
Yeah, there was a
So
lot of controversy about that. You know, very quite concerning that they could do that. But there's no question that stablecoins are super important for our own confidence in the market, because even us as participants, I mean, Tether itself is already something that literally people find, you know, people are very ambivalent about that, or that more to the point that there's a lot of FUD even with Tether. And so the more and more stable coins that come to the fore, and surely that's going to instill more confidence for people to move sideways in the economies rather than have to engage in fiat if they ever do that. Because the more and more liquidity we have in this ecosystem, the better it is for the long term. But again, what I do want to see is the capacity of stores of value to transform economies, particularly in developing regions. Because right now, it really does benefit, it does function too much as a means of storing that value.
that is something that I wanted to touch on, because I forget who was telling me about this, but it's funny how the Western view of it is like an investment vehicle and this and that. But there's people out there right now that are using it because they don't have a choice. They have no other way of actually transferring value.
In Venezuela. And David Hay is out there working to educate people about cryptocurrency. I saw that Dash has like a thing now where you can text sending Dash down there. Yeah. So,
and the thing, guys, as well, is that in those regions, if we use the analogy, for example, of bread, I mean, for them, if the BTC that they are utilizing to buy the bread costs them 2 loaves, that's the issue I have. I'm not saying it does, but I'm saying that I want to see the efficiency come to the fore for those parties, because that way it becomes relevant for the more global reach. And also in that respect, it's much more likely that mass adoption will move in that direction as enterprise moves forward. And the thing is, I don't know if they're necessarily synergistic. I don't know if, you know, BTC's direction is the same direction that we're headed with, for example, ontology, because they are different conversations, but they're still both very relevant, because we want to see the ability, just like you were saying before, of different influencers being able to travel the world in support of their projects and utilize that particular currency and live off that. That would be ideal.
I think my problem is that, like, I got involved in crypto and I actually love the idea of being able to stay at my house and talk to everybody via you know, back and forth on our cameras. But now apparently, now that I am in crypto and I do YouTube, I got to go to like every event ever, and I'm never allowed to stay home. And it's like the total opposite of what I thought it was going to be. So
right.
It's a lot more stressful traveling than some people would think. Like, even though it's traveling for pleasure and doing something that I love, it's hard to make content and travel and do everything. Yeah.
Plus, these conferences get expensive after a while, guys. I don't know how much money you think I'm making over here in the crypto world, but it's not that much, guys. I'm very, very average, actually. You'd be quite surprised about that. So
I can vouch for that. I know you, so it's true. And I mean, even with Singapore, consensus was expensive. And so a lot of people think that, you know, influencers get paid to shill and they get paid to travel. Well, the truth is, when I went to talk about, I forget what conference it was, but I paid my entire way. And the reason why I did was because I wanted to be able to say, you know, these are my views. And it's the same for all of us here, is that we do travel because when we can, because we want to spread the word of what we're doing. We're passionate about that project, but it doesn't mean that they pay us. It's just not the way it works.
Yeah, definitely,
man. YouTube pays next to nothing. For 1 million views, it's $1,000. So YouTube pays next to nothing.
Really, I think I've hit like 2.8. So I think if I was monetized, I just made over $2,500 in the past 8 months. There you go.
And I'm always really transparent.
But dude, put that into Ripple now. It's going to be worth so much more in 3 months.
I'm not going to buy it after it just pumped 44%. That's
especially if you follow that article, you know.
Yeah. So one more question I want to ask you guys, because I don't know how late I know we could talk forever. I usually try to keep these around an hour, but I mean, I'm down to stay on forever, guys. I'll do it for you guys. But I wanted to ask you a question. So what do you think, as far as these like little niches, like markets or whatever sectors, do you think are really pushing forward the forefront? I have recently become so obsessed with blockchain gaming, not necessarily for myself playing blockchain games, but just the fact of like how, like, getting it off of these centralized servers, allowing people to own their own in-game items and stuff like that. I think that is like a realistic, actual thing that could get people using blockchain. Like, what do you guys think?
I would love that, to be able to play games and actually make a living doing that. Like, play video games, you do what you're doing, having fun. You get armor and weapons and different stuff like that, and then you can sell the stuff you're not using, make money from that to continue providing for your lifestyle. I think that's an awesome idea.
Me too. And I literally think that is just like the beginnings of how this can integrate into other areas of business. And I think it's the very best use case for this kind of technology, because already we're seeing with, for example, Engine. I mean, KW, you know this company well. I've recently spoken with them. What's amazing about this is that they've found a way to use the user base that's already been substantial in their own companies to bring across into this sort of the blockchain arena, and allow them, most importantly, to have ownership. And this is the absolute asset of blockchain, is that for the first time ever, people can have complete control and autonomy over the asset that they create. So say, for example, you're creating a really cool sword or something. The first time, you control the amount of money. You decide how much that's worth. And if someone wants to buy it, that's awesome. But never in the history of gaming has that been possible quite like what's being proposed. And that's just the beginning of what this technology can do. So I think that we're already seeing evidence that this can and does work. And even in Hong Fei, actually recently for Neo, he said that he thinks gaming is one of the key, potentials of the near future for blockchain. And he was also saying SDOs is another one as a sort of killer app that's coming.
You're talking about security token offerings? Yeah.
They're going to be big.
Yeah, definitely, because they're a model that, for example, the U.S. can agree on. We already have laws surrounding that type of an offering, so it's a lot easier than trying to deal with these ICOs, which is just who even knows? Like, what are you even selling? Like, when you buy an ICO, what are you actually buying? Is my question. Like,
well, it's the same for us when we research them. Is that I spend most of my time reading white papers and that sort of thing, and it's the same. Is that it's speculative by design for all of us, because we're not guessing, but we're literally basing it on the theoretical potential of something. And that's why I like, people talked about reverse ICOs, but I actually like those that are already existent businesses that are moving into the blockchain space. Because, like, I'll give you a name, for example. I'll just throw it out there. Doesn't mean it's financial advice, but I just spoke with Top Network. I don't know yet. I haven't decided for myself if I want to invest in this company or not, but I will say this. They have a 50 million person user base already for their communications focus, and that's real. That's something that's quantifiable. So if they're doing something where they want to utilize blockchain, then again, because blockchain is just a mechanism for their business, I'm paying attention to the user base. I'm paying attention to what that business can do, not just what that blockchain can do. And so, harping back to gaming, there are some really powerful gaming entities that are in the centralized frame right now that are looking at blockchain. They're the ones we should be looking at, because once they flip that switch on the decentralized capacity, who knows what they could do. But yeah, I agree with you. Gaming is definitely a really good starter use case for decentralized ledger technologies.
Yeah, definitely. Gaming, voting, supply chain. Obviously smart contracts, but we're still trying to figure out how. See, I think the whole thing with the smart contracts is they're great digitally. They work awesome in their contained environments. But then in order to communicate with the outside world, you have to build the oracles, which then the question is, who's putting
the $1 million question?
Who's putting the input in the oracle, right? Because you probably, what if you have some guy on the other side like, oh, it's sunny out. Yeah, it's raining. Okay, give me my $500 on my auger bet, right? Like, so there still is that manipulation, which there's always going to be human error and human interference. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to go, like, I talked to some projects and they're convinced that, like, I forget who it was. They were like, oh, it's going to be completely AI, just all automated. And I'm like,
IoT.
You can't take people out of the mix. Come on. Like, you're going to just, I don't know. I want a kill switch button. I mean, it's either that or you're talking like Terminator, Skynet, right? Like,
right.
Make it happen.
Yeah, well, even if you look at things like, we talk a lot about AI and IoT, it came through, and I really noticed that it almost became like a buzzword for a while, then died off. People got sick of hearing AI because there were so many dApps that were claiming that they were going to be the next big solution. But I think if we go back to that sort of discussion we're having about the long term, both of those are super important, because blockchain enables for these kinds of areas of business to flourish, and they are going to be very prevalent and very relevant in the next few decades as we see, things unfold. But the big thing, I guess, the big ask of all the people in crypto, including us, is the patience factor. I mean, time is literally going to tell which of those do well, but the most important thing is that we don't react to the current state of the market and, just move so far away from it that you're not participating in it. Because if you remove yourself from the equation, then you're not really part of the solution whereby we can decentralize, whereby we have more autonomy. And that would be a shame, I think, if so many people became so disillusioned that it all just, came to some sort of, not endpoint, but it came to what we're almost seeing now, where there's a lot of lack of faith and there's a lot of frustration. I'd want to see that change into something more opportunistic.
But you know what I love though, Brad? You know what I love about the bear market personally? Is it kind of brings it back to the people that want to be here. Like if you're here now, you genuinely want to be here. You're not here because you're trying to 10x. I mean, you still technically are. A lot of people in the chat are definitely talking about money all night, which is fine. I mean, you got to have that incentive. But I think like the bear markets, they know shake out the weak hands, whatever. But I think it genuinely, like I said, it really just gets people like, okay, well, it's not mooning. So let me focus on the fundamentals. Let me focus on the tech. Let me focus on bridging these gaps. So definitely, guys.
Well, actually, you raised one more good point. I really wanted to talk to you both about this. This was an article that came up recently by Andrew Lee. And basically, I haven't read it thoroughly, but he was saying that he wanted to see more metrics that supported short-term access to tokens and less of the long-term vesting.
Oh, yeah.
What are you on? And I want to talk to you about that because I don't yet have super strong opinions, but I do want to see more of that long-term valorization of the project. I want people to know that these are designed to be long-term and for necessary reasons. And for that reason, I want to see more of the investment in current projects that are already tradable. I want to see things like, realistic expectations of growth. I don't want to see people investing in something because it can 4x tomorrow or 5x, but more so understand that it's going to do well because it has a value, has purpose.
And also people are tired of the same cloning projects. I mean, how many times are you going to clone the EVM? How many times are you just going to tweak consensus and then charge somebody 30 million in a fundraising round and be like, yeah, we're different. It's like, you're not though. Like, why don't you guys just go get a job with Ethereum or go get a job with Neo or go get a job with Cardano or something? Like, why?
Definitely.
I don't understand that.
Like, if they want to do low raises, I'm all for that, as long as those raise mechanisms. And remember, ICO is just a mechanism. It's not actually the startup. So if they transform the mechanism so it's egalitarian, so it's transparent, I'm all cool with that. But if they maintain any of these, a system in which it's hierarchical, it's tiered, and the first in is best dressed when it's a small raise, I'm sorry, I'm never going to support that because that is just reinforcing the 20x or the 30x for, so few. It means someone has to lose.
Wait. Are you saying if it's too small, you don't support? Like, you think it's...
Well, I'm supportive of it being small. That's not the issue.
Because I just talked to a project that's doing a $2.25 million raise, and they're literally telling people, do not invest in this unless you plan on actually using the platform. Like, they're actually discouraging people from investing. And I think that's really cool. Like,
yeah, I mean, totally. Because the thing is, if it's a small raise as well, and they're utilizing the current system we see with ICOs of, a very tiered system of access. Then what happens is, if you imagine that kind of small raise, if you're an initial investor, the potential for that is, for a really good project is immense for them. And so what I'm saying is I'd like to see less of the 100Xs for those initial small few and it more distributed so that more people can access that in a much more fair and transparent way. So it's not so much for me about how small that raise is. I don't want to see huge ones, obviously, but I want to see more transparency. Like, how Next did theirs. It was a really genuinely fair system. I want to see more of that so that people who are trusting the system...
Next was next level legit. Like, I mean, because like if you talk to the right people, they can like hook you up, maybe like slide some tokens under the table when no one's looking. Next was just like, no. They were like, it's a lottery, it's fair, this is how we're doing it, and they even went to get the thing registered as a security. So yeah, I mean, Next is like next level. Like, they're the guys you should be looking at. So
and also along those lines, kind of having like a tiered ICO or a tiered fundraising thing. Like, I mean, because here's the thing: these ICOs, they get $30 million and they have no idea how to spend the money, and then they just blow all the money, and they never really were planning on doing anything anyways. So more along the IPO route where they kind of had tiered things. So, here's the first round of it. We're raising this much. These are the things we're going to produce with that. And then once we get there, we'll have another fundraising round and another one. That way they can make unlimited amounts of money, but it's those projects that are doing nothing, they get a little chunk before they're like done.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Like incentivizing, like, okay, that way, like, you actually have incentive to hit your milestones, like think about it and think about like the reward system of people in general. If I give you everything up front, are you really going to put in as much effort as if you had to work for it? Right. I mean,
and even having business statements like what you were saying as well, Randall, is that you want to be really clear on what the the whole reason why you're raising that. And it's difficult when you see, we've even seen the likes of companies raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And then what they've done is they converted immediately into fiat. And I've literally asked these companies, why did you do that? You know, and their response was, well, obviously we couldn't trust, you know, the volatility of the system. And it's like, I understand the need. I'm not going to judge them for the need to secure their position because they've got to pay salaries. But obviously we can see the paradox is that they've utilized the system to then capitalize on that and then move it sideways because of, obviously we've seen things like Ethereum move recently. But at the same time, at what point are they proponents internally for the overall ecosystem? How do we reinvest that capital back in to make the market more liquid? I think that's a big conversation to have as well. You know, Hashgraph are one of the few that openly stated how they moved across into fiat, but many of them did. So it's like
Tim Brown in my chat, he said, I think what you guys are trying to say is we need more transparency. I think that's the ultimate theme of tonight is we need to get back to what the hell it was created for. I mean, Bitcoin was designed not to actually be anonymous, as most people don't understand that still. It's actually designed to be very transparent. And I think that that's really what we need. Like even with Horizon State, you know, they came out with, was it Horizon State? They have the coin thing app. Yeah, that there's a few of these other guys too. And I know that they're trying to make charities more, you know, so you know where the money's going and stuff like that. And I think those are great personally. So yeah.
What about projects? I mean, everyone wants to know that stuff.
Projects that I'm looking at currently. I mean, honestly, ever since this bear market, man, I haven't really looked into ICOs and these newer ones as much. Like ones that just came out. I mean, you guys know I like Veet. I mean, I've talked to Richard quite a few times. I like that project. I like it. They're another one of those guys that they don't really promote at all. They're just kind of like in the background. I mean, obviously, Elastos is another one that we look at a lot, which I was quite surprised today because the Elastos really didn't move today the way that the other coins did. Like when they had that, did you see that like little mini pump that happened earlier? And then some people were fudding about the whole the ETF postponement, but it didn't actually get postponed. So I don't know what everybody's talking about. It's actually, they said that they're just, I guess they're like extending the period for which they're deciding it to the 30th. So it's not, they're not saying like, no, they're saying, no, we're actually looking at it, but like, we're not ready with the decision. So it's, if you think about it, like that's actually the first one that they've even acknowledged to that level. True. So for me, that's bullish news. So everyone watching, I'm bullish, but what do I know? CNBC, you know, don't listen to them. If you do what they do, 95% of the time it goes the other way. So
well, it's a matter of eventuality anyway. Eventually something's going to happen, whether or not it happens, you know, in I think it was February they said, whether it happens later, eventually it will. But what do you reckon, Randall, about projects and stuff like that? Like, given that the market is what it is? I've
been pleasantly surprised with the projects that I've seen in this bull market. Like, it seems like the people that I interview now, they're actually doing legitimate things. Really also, like, number one, they're really intelligent people. They're doing amazing things. So I think that's really good because it has weeded out all of the people who are, you know, just trying to grab money. But ICOs definitely aren't popular. Like
well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about.
I just stopped doing ICO reviews because everybody thinks that it's a shill and they just don't even watch them anymore. So
well, that's what I wanted to talk to you both about, because I literally don't understand, and maybe it's just me, but when people say to me all the time, you know, Brad, why do you talk about ICOs? I say to them, well, explain to me what you mean by ICO, because I don't talk about ICOs. I talk about startups. I talk about projects. You know what I mean? And
because when you make an ICO, people assume that you're talking about investing into the project, whereas sometimes it's actually pleasurable to talk to CEOs that just have good tech. You know?
Right. And the other thing too, I often explain is that, I mean, I don't mind saying that I will invest in some of these projects if I can, if I really believe in them. No problem. I disclose that on my channel. But the thing is that when someone says to me, oh, you know, what ICO are you into? I say, well, ICO is just a mechanism. It doesn't mean anything more than that. It literally doesn't. And so I say to them, look into the business, look into the startup, look into the plan, look into what this represents. But the ICO, once, as I said, is just a mechanism. That mechanism could change. And perhaps it will in the future for certain startups. But I focus on startup. You know, I want to see, and sometimes not startups, sometimes businesses are moving from pre-existing structures into new ones. But at the end of the day, I look at business. I look at what it can do, what's its potential, how can it move, what's it going to, you know, what's its functionality, utility, etc. So for me, I think ICO gets way overused as a term as well.
Yeah, and it's a tough position we're in because if we say something positive, we're shilling it. If we say something negative, it's FUD. So like either way, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So like I just kind of look at it as like my channel's a way to give a lot of these things a voice because people are listening, and also to spread my stupid harebrained opinions. That's
Yeah, but at least you're fun. At least you're fun. Like that's one thing I definitely didn't get that gene.
Definitely, guys. So, I don't know about you guys. It's getting a little late. I mean,
Yeah.
it's for
Yeah, it was
well, I know
really
Brad.
fun.
It's
Really
like
glad we
morning.
talked.
It's morning time for you, but me and Love we're on the same time. So,
Sure.
late night.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. It's been really interesting.
yeah, thank you guys, man. I really appreciate it. And everyone that came out in the chat, please, if you guys haven't subscribed to either of these guys already, please check out Blockchain Brad. I mean, he's just a plethora of knowledge. And Crypto Love, man, you know, like when I first started, obviously you were like, I pretty much copied your style literally, like when I first started, because I was just like, this guy's awesome, and you know, I appreciate what you do as well. So thank you guys both for stopping by. You're really both inspirations for me. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Likewise,
Thanks a
mate.
lot,
Thank
man.
you very much.
All right, guys. So until next time,
Peace,
stay
peace.
crypto. Peace out.